Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. In a bid to strengthen Nigeria's domestic economy and promote local content, President Bola Tinubu has initiated a policy that bars ministries, departments and agencies, MDAs from procuring foreign goods or services already available locally without a written waiver from the Bureau of Public Procurement. This is as the Federal Executive Council approved a sweeping new policy directive aimed at prioritizing Nigerian businesses, goods and services in all government-related economic activities. The new policy tagged the renewed Hope Nigeria First policy seeks to foster a new business culture that is bold, confident and very Nigeria. Joining me tonight to elaborate on this is startup business lawyer Omori Edogawari. Good evening to you, Mr. Omori. It's good to see you again. Thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Right, so, my first question would be, what exactly is the main goal of the Nigeria First policy approved by the federal government?
Indigenous support for indigenous businesses, helping to boost local production and manufacturing, boost the economy, and retain investments. Already we have an FX challenge, so if you boost local production and consumption, then there will be less demand for foreign exchange for the purpose of importation. So I think that every country looks to boost its indigenous production, right? Not just for local consumption, but for exports. We, for so long, have been on the other side, where we are importing way more than we are exporting, right? Where our local consumption needs are only able to be met by importation, because locally we cannot even produce enough to be able to sustain us. So it's a sensible decision.
But why is it important for Nigeria to reduce dependence on foreign goods?
You cannot, you have to learn to, it's like having a house, right? Running your home and having to buy takeouts every day, right? After some time, it ceases to be sustainable. You have to begin to look at building your indigenous capacity to cater to yourself, right? So what happens if China shuts their doors on us? What happens if, if the US shuts their doors, if Netherlands shuts their doors, right? If India shuts their doors? If we have what it takes to produce certain items, then let us, focus on improving systems in place that will help boost indigenous production, right? So it's important, and every right-thinking government must always look inward at what do we need to do to help improve our indigenous production framework. But you see, what has happened over time is it's an anomaly where we have relied heavily on exports, or on imports, sorry, for everything, right? We're importing things as simple as toothpick, right? We're importing manpower. The Minister of Interior came out the other day to point out the fact that people are bringing in drivers, right? People are bringing in certain persons to perform certain services or provide certain skill sets that we can readily find locally. So it has now become a vice, a status symbol, right? And made in Nigeria is not attractive, right? You look at, everybody wants, oh, is this imported? Is this furniture imported? And this, and those are the issues that continue to bedevil our indigenous manufacturing, right? Manufacturing Association is saying it's very difficult to even access funding. We have certain infrastructural challenges that is even making it unattractive for us to be able to compete with imports. Because if you struggle to produce, looking at the challenges that exist, your price margin goes up. And somebody who is able to import, right, you are competing with the person who does not have your production costs. And then you also have a perception problem where we value exports more than, where we value imports more than locally made products, right? So those are the issues. It's a long chain, right? And while I commend the directive by the president, we must move beyond just making...
Yes, because I wanted to go there. This is not the first time some of us have been hearing Nigeria first, by Nigeria. But this time, what must change? Are we serious this time? Does it look like the federal government is serious this time? I mean, we've heard a lot of it during the Buhari administration, am I correct? So what must change this time? What must the federal government do to show some level of seriousness?
Infrastructure. You have to have the infrastructure, right? You can't say, okay, we want to promote indigenous production. You cannot import, what we can produce locally. Have you created an enabling environment for the local producers to be able to produce and compete? What are our consumption needs? So I like to be driven by data. And it's important that we look at the data. What we are importing, do we have the capacity to sustain if we produce locally? Do we have enough sustain? So I like the fact that it's starting with MDAs, government MDAs. They're one of the largest importers of different things, right? But then I hope that this decision is one that is driven by data. It's one that is driven by just understanding what the numbers are saying and understanding that beyond this directive, if you don't want scarcity in your hands, if you don't want hoarding and smuggling in your hands, then two things must happen. You need to look at the data of the indigenous producers. Okay. What are the things they need? You need power, security, access to finance, right? A semblance of a balanced regulation, right? There seems to still be a topsy-turvy arrangement when it comes to regulation, especially regarding, different levels of government and all that. So those issues need to be tidied up.
We have that kind of challenge.
Well, because you have different levels of government, right? And everyone, there's an ultra high revenue drive from everyone. They want to be sustainable. But I like the fact that the Senate has passed the Tax Reform Act. I think that will put a lot of things in a clear perspective. So that's one. But beyond that, what are the challenges that our indigenous manufacturers have? Right. We also have a skills gap, right? We have a dangerous skills gap. And I think we need to revisit the expatriate quota arrangement as has been. I know that the minister, there's some reforms that have gone on, but we need to look at the impact of the technology transfer. Okay. There still remain a skill set challenge, right? And if we don't fix the skills gap, we will continue to have critical functions being outsourced because you do not have local capacity. So this is where NOTAP needs to, sit up. This is where certain relevant agencies need to look at. These expatriates you are coming in, is there a clear system in place where there is a knowledge transfer arrangement for most of these businesses that come up? Do we have a backward integration system, right, that is giving capacity to indigenous companies to begin to produce under the supervision of these foreign companies over a period of time, after which they can now leave them to build sustainably? So what we have, I like to call it a scavenger arrangement. Come in, get as much as you can, and when you've had enough and you don't need, you leave the scrapes and you go off. Nigeria cannot continue to be like that.
Absolutely. You talked about ease of doing business. You talked about the importance of an enabling environment. And I remember we had this conversation last year. From the last time we had this conversation and now, has anything changed? Have you improved a bit?
So there isn't a yes or no arrangement answer. And the reason is quite clear. The challenges continue to morph, right? We are facing quite a lot with the economic imbalance, right? And with some of the challenges that have now come to the fore as a result of inflation and the likes. A lot of businesses are beginning to tighten, their systems. But then so are the regulators. So regulators are changing rules to stay afloat. And that is affecting the ease of doing business that we're talking about. Because even the regulator needs revenue. And so a lot of the rules are changing, and there seems to be, you know, in some quarters, you know, this overnight shift on certain things that can stifle certain businesses, right? So today you come to the fees have gone up, or the rules have changed, and even manpower. So again, one of the major overhauls we need is to go back to our first 11. And who's our first 11? Our civil service.
Okay.
We need to tidy up the knowledge base. We need to build heavily on technology and innovation in order to equip the workforce to be able to compete and provide fit for purpose service that will enable that ease of doing business we're talking about. Right? So in an era of technology and innovation, one thing that is very, very essential is that the regulator, government, must be at the forefront of understanding the intersection between regulation, between providing ease of doing business and technology.
Okay.
Being able to bridge this gap to provide services that are swift, that are cost effective, and that are practically in tune with our current realities continues to be a problem. And when you speak to private sector players, I have a couple of private sector players who are in government today and who are friends, and when we speak, one of the challenges they face is the paradigm shift, right, between what obtains in the private sector and what obtains in the public sector. Even with the capacity of the workforce to be able to deliver, follow certain procedures, innovate and build, we have to find a middle ground, right, where you get this, our first 11, to understand that it's no longer business as usual.
All right. So this was a question someone asked me today. I didn't think I had enough answers for this question. So help us break this down. Why should Nigerians trust and choose locally made products over foreign ones?
So we must, again, come out of the mediocrity problem. And that mediocrity problem that has bedeviled our local production system is because for a very long time we have relied on foreign goods and services. So local producers have had an inferiority complex.
Okay.
If you look largely at the handsome gentlemen that wear native attire, they are produced locally. Some of us have had some of these clothes for years. Some have worn clothes for 10 years and the clothes still look good. They were produced locally, right? In certain instances, local production stands, and that's because we go there as a result of our cultural leanings. But in other instances, we prefer, how many people will buy locally produced vehicles? How many people will buy locally produced electronic services? I would even believe that this beautiful furniture set was assembled in Nigeria but produced abroad. And that is also because of the emphasis on quality. But what has affected our local quality? Now, infrastructure, the quality of raw materials, and this is where research and development must come in. So, you know, it's a twin effect, right? You can't really separate one from the other. What are the quality of the raw materials we have? What is the quality of the system we have in place for production? And the skills gap continues to be a major challenge. Remember that even our education system has failed. And I say this without any fear of ever. Our system of go to school, get a degree, get a job has failed us. And that's what has created the gulf of our skills gap. And when you talk about indigenous production, you have to rewrite that statistics. You have to change that mindset. Because not everybody needs a degree. Some people should be trained through time to build on their skills. So someone can decide today that I want to be a furniture maker. And so goes through the entire 6 years in school and all that, learning the rudiments of production, learning the rudiments of finishing, branding, and different things. And then comes out to produce fantastic products. But then a lot of people who have skills gap, a lot of people who have skills today and are producing, stumbled on it. And so there isn't a structured training system. Polytechnic education has not necessarily hit that nerve as it should, right? So that's the problem. So local production is still suffering an inferiority complex, right? If you see an Italian-made suit and a Nigerian-made suit, first instance, you go for the Italian-made suit until they hit you with a big amount, and then you look at that.
The rich, the wealthy ones.
We have 36 state governors. How many of the governors are using made in Nigeria vehicles? How many of them, you even walk into a government office and you're watching foreign television. That, I call that the relics of colonialism. We continue to feel that the only time we can establish how much we have arrived is when we have some semblance of foreign goods, foreign products, and stuff around us. And so we're not proud of the things we produce locally. And the only way we can break that jinx is when luxury and affluence is viewed from our local lens.
All right, but how do you think local manufacturers are reacting to this Nigeria First policy?
Well, a smart local manufacturer will look at what his internal framework is and begin to fix his system in order to be able to compete, right? They say preparation meets opportunity. This is an opportunity. Government is saying anything we can produce locally, we will not import, right? So you look at what you can produce locally and what you're producing well and the numbers of production, and ensure that you're able to say to government, I can produce this, I have the capacity, this is what I need, right? I would expect that as the policy morphs, and we're expecting the Attorney General to issue an executive order to that effect, financial institutions will begin to look to fund local businesses to be able to meet the demands of these NDAs. And then, hopefully that will boost their income generation.
Is it certain that this new policy will strike the right balance between protecting the local industries and promoting competitiveness?
Well,
is it certain?
It will only strike the right balance, and it will only achieve this if we do not apply a haphazard approach, and which is one of our biggest challenges. Haphazard arrangements. We like to announce policies. We like to clap about policies. Implementation continues to be our biggest albatross. And you see, while it's very easy to blame government first, right? Have the people even bought into it? A challenge, So if you look at the number of government contractors today, most of them are really not producing. They are intermediaries. You come take, then you go abroad, go to China, import and come and assemble and supply, right? And it's ultimately cheaper. So if government is saying, I want to boost indigenous manufacturing in order to supply whatever we can produce locally, government must now intentionally cater to certain things, one of which is power. Okay. 2, access to finance. 3, governmental supports, ease of doing business, tax rebates, and certain things that will allow these businesses the leeway to be able to go all in.
Is there enough financing and credit support for manufacturers?
There isn't. Man has been shouting.
We may try to, expand under this policy framework.
Man has been shouting that it's too expensive to access money. MPC is still going up, right? And so the interest rates are still going up. So it's more expensive to produce.
So what's your advice to government?
So you can't take an isolated arrangement. You cannot just make a one-off declaration and expect that everything will fall into place. These other challenges will affect the impact that you're trying to create. So you must look at these things and fix them. Now, we have a power challenge, yes. Now today you have band A, you have band B, band D, band. Government must now create designated manufacturing zones that guarantees 24-hour power. Produce, have this, look at we're in Eco-Atlantic, right? What stops government from having a hub like this for manufacturing? Designated manufacturing zones where you create power, you give certain access, and then these manufacturers will move to these hubs and produce. If you cut out power from the average manufacturer's problem, you've done at least 50% of their problem. And also ensure that the power is affordable, right? And can match, their profit margin. One, encourage access to finance, right? BOI, there should be a synergy between financial institutions, manufacturing association, the Ministry of Trade and Investment, and certain other relevant ministries, where they look at how do we give the right financial access to these businesses, how do we help them boost indigenous production, and then also monitor impact. Like I said, government is very quick to give grants, but are they also quick to measure impact? I was excited. I think at the beginning of the Tinubu administration, one of the things I was excited about was the appointment of Hadiza Bala Osman to look at impact. All she was supposed to do is to look at impact across all the sectors of government, measure and gauge that impact. Is she doing that as she should? Right? Time will tell. But we must focus as heavily as we focus on all these announcements on the impact we want to achieve. You must look at the impact. You must see, is this working? If it's not working, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's look again. Let's see if we need to reassess certain things. Let's see if we need to go back to the drawing board and fix certain issues, and then we come back. It's not going to happen overnight.
Absolutely. So another conversation that came up since this directive went public is, people are asking if there should be any exceptions where foreign goods can still be procured under this policy. So
you see, one bane of Nigeria, you see these exceptions that we're talking about, they can become a big problem. Because tomorrow, those who have ear of the powers that be will begin to have these waivers, and all that. If we are shutting down, let us shut down. But then, have they looked at all the facts before deciding that we need to shut down? Yes, there can be extreme measures where they may need to give certain waivers. But you must close that gap as tight enough. Maybe only the president can issue these approvals. They have said, okay, you must get a waiver from the Bureau of Public Procurement if you want to bring that in. But then what are the measures to ensure that these waivers that are going to be given are actually necessary? Right? Someone can go and justify why they need to import toothpick. Okay. Justification is not hard to give. So if we say we have the capacity to produce this, identify those in the business of this production, equip them, fund them, and get them to start producing. Okay. And then back them up. Because the moment you allow importation of goods that are being produced locally, there is an imbalance of power automatically.
Also, Mr. Mori, are Nigerian manufacturers prepared to meet the increased demand?
Why are they not prepared?
Government contracts.
Why are they not prepared? Infrastructure.
Why are they not prepared, or why shouldn't they?
Why are they not prepared? You said, are they prepared? If they're not prepared, it will be an infrastructure challenge. It will be power. It will be access to funding. It will be the skills gap. Now, there are certain areas where they could do better personally, and they should do better. But the bulk of the problem still lies on the enabling environment and the systems in place, right? And so, as these policies are coming into place, we must have, and I've just told you now, if you create a designated manufacturing zone where there is guaranteed 24 hours power supply, where there is guarantee, where there are certain waivers for defined periods, and you shortlist and bring in the right businesses, and government actively monitors, you will see that indigenous production will go up.
All right. So I think my final question would be, will this policy, in your own opinion, affect Nigeria's trade agreements with other countries?
Not really. We are 220 million people.
So how do we ensure that it does not?
Or more. So even the things we can produce locally are still way less than the things we still don't have the capacity to produce locally. So we will still need to import for many more years. Okay. What we just need to do is to begin to cut reduce the amount of things we import and stop impulsive importation. Right? Because you see, impulsive importation stifles innovation, local innovation. Whatever you see that is fine in that place that you want to import and begin to sell here. You can encourage an indigenous person to produce and, you know, start selling. So once we have that balance, I think we'll be
it's a fresh policy, and of course the minister has said the policy would soon be backed by an executive order with the Attorney General directed to draft the necessary legal instruments. So we'll continue to monitor developments.
We will.
Thanks a lot for joining us, business startup lawyer Omori Edugari. Thanks a lot for your time. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Right. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But before we go, let's tell you that the views and reactions of our resource persons are theirs and have no connection with TVC News. Meanwhile, you can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode at midnight. Get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, and X at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News NG. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Good night, everyone.